This is the story of how my search for love turned into a digital nightmare. It all started innocently enough when I met a girl online who seemed perfect. But little did I know, she was about to shatter my world. As a young man in my 20s, I found myself drawn to online dating in particular because it was more convenient, and if I'm being honest, I was always a bit shy around the opposite sex. It wasn't easy finding genuine connections in a sea of swipes, but when I matched with a girl who we can call Amber, everything seemed to fall into place. Our conversations flowed effortlessly, and her messages made my heart skip a beat. Amber was witty, charming, and beautiful. We chatted for weeks, and I couldn't wait to finally meet her in person. But the weeks went on. Amber seemed hesitant to take our relationship offline. She always had an excuse for why she couldn't meet up: a last-minute work commitment, a sudden illness, or family emergencies. My friends warned me that something seemed fishy, but as I brushed off their concerns, I was too smitten to see the warning signs right in front of me. One evening, Amber dropped a bombshell. She confessed that the pictures she had shared weren't actually hers. My heart sank as she revealed that she had catfished me all along. I was stunned, hurt, and unable to understand why she would do such a thing. The girl I thought I knew was just a figment of someone else's imagination. Amber's true appearance wasn't what mattered, it was the betrayal that cut deep. I confronted her, demanding to know why she had lied to me for so long. Instead of remorse, she lashed out, blaming me for not liking her despite her deception. "You would have never given me a chance if I showed you the real me," she yelled through the screen. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been vulnerable, hoping to find love and companionship, and she had taken advantage of that. But instead of apologizing, she turned the tables and attacked me. I tried to distance myself from the situation, blocking her from all my social media accounts and deleting her number. But Amber was relentless, creating new profiles to harass and attack me. She called me names, questioning my worth and mocking my vulnerability. My confidence plummeted, and I found myself spiraling into a dark place. One day I got a message on LinkedIn from a young woman I didn't know. There was nothing alarming about her profile, and it wasn't strange that she wanted to connect with me because we both worked in the same industry, and it was common for people in the same industry to want to connect with each other. Her message was simple. She introduced herself and said she wanted to connect with like-minded individuals in her industry. I responded with something short and simple. I did notice that I was only one of maybe 30 connections, but I assumed her profile was just new and she was building her presence on the website. Anyway, let's fast forward to a few months later. There was a major industry event happening in a nearby big city, and everyone in my circle was planning to attend. A few days before the event, I received a message from this woman who was my new connection, asking if I had planned to attend. I told her I was, and she told me she was looking forward to attending and would see me there. Call me naive, but I still thought nothing of her message. On the day of the event, everything was normal. I worked my way around the event hall, saying hello to familiar faces and introducing myself to a few unfamiliar faces. About an hour into the event, I was approached by the same woman I recognized from the site. She introduced herself as Amber, and I damn near dropped the drink I was holding. I asked her what she was doing there, and she said she came to confront me for what I had done to her. That's when I realized that I was standing in front of a full-blown psycho. This woman had created a fake profile and slipped her way into an industry event of an industry she didn't even work in. I should add that this even was very far from where she lived, and she definitely had to get on a plane to get there. This was the second time she was catfishing me, and I was not only pissed off, but I was creeped out and embarrassed. My colleagues were all standing from a distance and observing the interaction between her and myself. I managed to get away from her and spoke to the security guards at the event who escorted her out when she couldn't confirm which company she was representing. This whole experience made me realize that people aren't always who they seem to be, and on the internet, people can play any role they want. Let's just say that since this happened to me, I now FaceTime with people before getting too deeply involved.
The story I'm about to tell you is a story about how a seemingly innocent online connection turned my life upside down. It all started with a girl I met on social media, but little did I know that she would weave a web of deceit that would nearly destroy me. Leading up to these events, I was no stranger to online dating. It seemed like a cool way to meet new people and possibly find a genuine connection. So, when I matched with Sophia, I was excited about the possibilities. We hit it off immediately. Sophia was goofy like me and seemed to understand me like no one else. We chatted for hours, sharing our dreams and aspirations, and I found myself drawn to her. But as time went on, I noticed she was becoming more possessive and demanding. She insisted on video calls at odd hours and would get upset if I didn't respond to her messages immediately. My buddies were warning me about her behavior, but I defended her, believing that maybe she just cared deeply for me. But deep down, a nagging feeling told me something wasn't quite right. One night, after a heated argument, Sophia threatened to cut ties with me if I didn't agree to meet her in person at her place. I hesitated, unsure about her intentions, but she guilted me into agreeing. As she opened the door of her apartment, I noticed a girl who looked different from the photos Sophia had shared. It was like meeting a stranger instead of the person I thought I knew. She confessed to catfishing me, and I was annoyed, but I also felt relieved that I hadn't invested too much emotionally. I decided to end things and walked away, thinking that would be the end of it. But I couldn't have been more wrong. The very next day, I received a barrage of messages from Sophia, accusing me of being heartless and cruel for rejecting her. When her messages went unanswered, Sophia took it to the next level. She fabricated a lie, claiming I had sexually assaulted her during our meeting. My heart sank as I read her false accusations. My world turned upside down as the weight of the false accusations and the fear of the consequences crushed me. Within days, the police showed up at my doorstep, arresting me on charges of sexual assault. I was stunned, my mind reeling with disbelief. How could my life unravel so quickly? I was terrified of the potential consequences, knowing that a false accusation like this could ruin my life. Luckily, everyone who knew me knew none of the accusations against me were true, and they fully supported me. I decided to fight back. My parents hired an attorney to prove my innocence and gathered evidence that contradicted Sophia's story. It didn't take long for the prosecutors to see that Sophia had made the entire story up. Her lies started to unravel, and the evidence against her stacked up. Before the court date, Sophia finally admitted to lying about the assault. She claimed she did it out of revenge for rejecting her, but her actions had far-reaching consequences that she couldn't comprehend. By the time she confessed, the damage had already been done. I had lost my job and my apartment, forcing me to move back in with my parents. The charges against me were dropped in the end, but that didn't replace everything I had already lost. I had to rebuild my entire life. I learned to be cautious about whom I let into my circle because Sophia's actions had nearly destroyed me. In the end, I learned that while the digital world can connect us, it can also expose us to some pretty screwed up people, and I just decided to remove myself from social media altogether.
My name is Jay, and I work as a bartender at a popular spot where people from all walks of life get together to have a good time. As a bartender, it was normal to witness couples having their first date. Sometimes if they were speaking loudly or I was close by, I could hear their entire conversation. One of my regular customers, Chris, often brought his first dates to the bar and we would talk about how the date went afterward. At this time, I had been working at the bar for 2 years and had built a good rapport with Chris. It was a typical Saturday evening, and the bar was pretty busy. A few hours into my shift, Chris walked in and sat at the bar. He placed his order, and I poured his usual drink. I asked him if he was waiting for someone special, and as usual, he was. He said he was waiting for a girl who he met online. He said this was their first in-person meeting. We chatted for a little bit before I wished him luck as he took a sip of his drink, and a short while later, a young woman walked in. She looked exactly like the pictures Chris had shown me, and he seemed relieved as he waved her over. But as the night progressed, something seemed off between them. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but tension hung in the air like a storm cloud. At one point, I overheard Chris ask, "Are you sure those pictures are really you?" The young woman, who introduced herself as Jess, brushed it off, claiming she was just having a bad hair day in her photos. As the evening wore on, their conversation grew more heated, and I could tell Chris was feeling uneasy. I kept an eye on them, ready to step in if needed. Suddenly, Jess's tone shifted, and she leaned in, speaking in almost a whisper. I couldn't make out what she said, but it seemed to infuriate Chris. Before I could intervene, Chris slammed his hands on the table, shouting, "You've been lying to me this whole time." The commotion caught the attention of the other people sitting in the bar, and I could feel the tension in the room escalate. Jess, or rather, the person pretending to be Jess, didn't back down. Instead, she stood up, with anger written all over her face. Chris stood up too, and they were face to face. I couldn't help but wonder why Chris was getting too aggressive with a woman. He was usually a mild-mannered ladies' man, and this was far from his character. Before I knew it, a fight erupted right before my eyes, fists flying and chairs crashing to the ground. I rushed to call for help, but before I knew it, Chris pulled out a knife. I was so scared as I watched the knife glint in the dim light of the bar. I yelled for everyone to back off, but the chaos just kept intensifying. In the frenzy, I saw the woman stumble back, clutching her side. Her dress had a blood stain on it. A few of the guys in the bar jumped in and grabbed Chris while two men walked over to help the woman. I walked over to Chris in disbelief and asked him what the heck was his problem and why he was beating up that woman. That's when Chris yelled out, "That's not a woman." Everyone looked very confused. Chris explained in a fit of rage that the woman he was on a date with was in fact a man pretending to be a woman. As I took a closer look at her, I realized that what he said was true. Within minutes, the police and ambulance arrived and took Chris's date away on a stretcher. The police who came on the scene arrested Chris and took some witness statements. I wasn't sure how to feel. On one hand, I felt bad for Chris because he felt betrayed, but on the other hand I think he took it too far by attacking his date. I hadn't seen Chris for a while after the incident because the owner of the bar had banned him from returning. I did run into him around the city a few times, and that's all I got for you.